Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. This is the Love Again podcast, and it's me, um, Patrick. It says right there on the screen. It's me, and I'm glad you're here. I can't remember. I've stopped numbering these episodes, so I think this is like six or seven now. So we're here. I'm here. I'm not alone. I'm excited today. We have a very special guest for the first time, Dr. Gaylena White, and she's right there. Just wave at the people.
Hello, hello.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for being a
Thank
part of
you
this.
for having me.
Oh, this is cool. Gaylena and I go way back. Is it okay
Yeah,
if I call you Gaylena tonight, or do
it
I need to?
is. No,
It's,
you don't need a handle. Dating is enough. It's enough.
we go way back now. Let's not date. Let's start counting the years.
Let's not.
A minute. we
A
we
minute.
no, yeah, a minute, a nice minute. And so I'm glad you're here. Before we deep dive into like all the stuff that I want to talk to you about, I want people to kind of get familiar with your background and what you do. And first of all, you do everything. So I don't know where you want to start, but
I'm traveling journey.
I don't know where you want to
I'm
start.
journey to travel.
Yeah, yeah. It's so I want people to know your faith background and what you do and all the like.
Okay, so my faith background starts from, you know, a tiny little P. My grandfather was my pastor and bishop. My father took over the ministry after that. When he passed, my mom took over ministry, and I am about to merge and join her in ministry together. There was little piece of that, and I'm sure we're going to dig deeper into that, where my husband and I were in ministry. Apart from my parents, his parents were ministry, and so when I married, I traveled over onto his side, and then I came back on this side. My background, professional background, includes education. I started as a preschool teacher, kindergarten teacher, worked my way up through curriculum development,
Uh-huh.
and because I like to kind of figure things out and put things on a put things in a some type of growth module,
Uh-huh.
and so that actually became extremely an important piece because it kind of went into other areas. After I did that curriculum development in education, I took it into healthcare, and I worked in healthcare management.
Uh-huh.
And I worked for a company that took over smaller companies, smaller failing companies, and so there was in my administration a revitalization plan, a restoration plan that I had to come up with and or restore systems, managements, and things of that nature in healthcare facilities, long-term care, and mental health care.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I moved like that administratively.
Uh-huh.
All of the while, my heart and my passion is ministry, music, and so I was moonlighting during my full time career in health administration in online ministry. And I started just with prayer, went from praying to allowing people to ask me questions about my own personal prayer, helping them develop through a 21-day system called Walk With Me 21. I helped them to develop their own personal prayer life or reach their own um, intimate goals with God. You know, had nothing to do with direction. It had nothing to do with promotion in God, but just taking care of the internal nature of the relationship. And that then moved into a whole nother realm where then I opened up an online educational platform to teach people beyond what you learn in seminary, because in seminary we learn very structural things and very that are pertinent to our existence as preachers, pastors, and things of that nature. But There were self-check things that I found along the way that they don't always offer in seminary, but that you need, especially as a um, you know, I don't call it a healthcare professional. We need to, but a spiritual healthcare professional or a pastor or a spiritual leader, we need those as well. And so I developed that. And that today is called Realm University. It's like a kingdom life school.
Mhm.
And right now, I'm going through and going to launch the merger of the traditional, if you will, traditional aspects of ministry, having a church where you go and you fellowship and having that, and then also coupling it with the online portion called Realm University. And so I'm getting that together, sticking those two pieces together.
Mhm.
And of course, along the way, this all seems like it was very, very random, but I'm coming to a pinnacle, a place now where it's starting to make sense. There were some other things I didn't add in this, like I was a radio disc jockey when I was in college. That's starting to come around. I did a couple of TV shows behind the scenes and in front of the scenes to help other people when I was in college through their majors. Even some of that stuff is being highlighted and coming back professionally, if you will. I can't release all of that, but it's starting to make sense. All of the little pieces that I was doing prior, it's starting to make sense and beginning to gel very well, I think.
Well, so you are basically the Oprah Winfrey of like you just what don't you just between Oprah and Tyler Perry. I just because they both run big, huge conglomerates of
Listen,
that's
hey, it's out there for them. It's out there for me.
and go get it. Absolutely. Go get it. I'm not mad at you at all. That's a lot.
Yeah.
I'm so interested in everything. But let's start here. Your
Okay.
church background. Um, Both you and I were raised in the church,
Mhm.
and you were Pentecostal, right?
Yep.
Pentecostal. I'm interested, and I've been thinking through what the church taught us about love.
Mm. Or
Um,
what they did teach us.
yeah,
Okay.
we'll get to that
Okay.
because as young people, they were so invested about what we did or didn't do with our bodies,
Yeah.
like just all in, vested on telling us what to do or not to do. That they never, I can't remember, and I try to think about this. Did they ever teach us how to love? Right. And even when they gave us for God so loved the world, what exactly does that mean?
Right.
And so I'm interested in where our concepts of love come from, or was this just my experience? Did you experience
No,
the
sure. So I have a very interesting story then with that. So my parents or my mom and her mother, my grandmother, grew up Kojic. My great grandmother and was, and my great grandfather, who was a wonderful heathen, he got saved in his 80s, right, or 70s. They built the first Kojic church in where my mom is from in Missouri.
Mhm.
Which oddly enough, I've traveled back and lived there for a brief minute outside of Chicago. Long story short, my great grandfather built the church, but my great grandmother was basically the one that ran the Kojic church. My grandmother, of course, raised her children, my mom included, and her six siblings in the Kojic church that came to Chicago and set under Papa Alfred. And so our initial upbringings was from Progressive Kojic church. And so we did that.
Let me
My
just-
grand Yeah, so my
yeah.
grandmother and her twin sister were pastoral care for Papa Alfred. And
Mhm.
so we still today have a strong, strong time connection to the Alfred family, Progressive Life Giving Word Cathedral. And so we were there. However, my grandmother's mom So it's my great grandmother. She got cancer. And so there was a woman at my grandmother's job, because she worked for the post office, that told her about a woman by the name of Mother Bessie Bato. Mother Bessie Bato was a strong presence evangelist.
Healing Temple.
Where?
Bethlehem Healing Temple.
No, actually, God's House of All Nations.
Okay.
So God's House of All Nations, Dr. Lavelle Hardy is now the pastor of that church. Rexel Hardy, Excel Hardy, they were twins. They had children. Anyway, yes. So God's House of All Nations. Then what? So after that experience, when my great grandmother had cancer, she brought her up from Missouri, brought her to Chicago. She got healed by Mother Bato. So then everybody started going to Mother Bato's church, and then so that's when we switched from being Kojic to being Pentecostal. During that time, my grandfather, who was not saved, who was a hellion, bona fide hellion, and we can go in his story. He was a womanizer. He was a drunkard. He was a gambler. He was, all the above. He was, but like typical 60s fathers, he was a father, and he ran his household well, with all of that backlash. Long story short, he got saved under Mother Bessie Bato.
Well, he was 80.
No, that was my great grandfather.
Okay.
My grandfather got saved when he was in his early 50s. When he got saved in his early mid 50s at Mother Bato's church, so he wasn't Kojic, everybody else was. When he finally got saved, he got saved out of the Pentecostal church. He was saved probably maybe 3 years. Mother Bato taught, and that's why I said all of this story, right? Mother Bato taught for 3 years, one passage in the Bible. She taught 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter, which is on love. And so our church was birthed 3 years later. He got saved and sat under her ministry for 3 years. And the only message she preached was love. So our church's name then became God's House of Brotherly Love. Now, right. So now, my grandfather, who was my bishop, who started the church, who was a spinoff of God's House of All Nations. Now it's God's House of Brotherly Love on the west side, because my family was traveling back and forth to the south side on 87th and Stony to God's House of All Nations. Now, he had only been saved a short period of time, and he only learned one message because she only preached every Sunday, Wednesday, Friday night, one message, God's House of Brotherly Love. He only had a 6th grade education. So the only thing that he taught our church for many years was about 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter. So our church was founded on that love, unconditional love, a love that repented, all of that. Now, oddly enough, it was, even though she taught that message for 3 years, obviously she had a reason why she was teaching that message for 3 years, because there wasn't a lot of it going around where she was. But my grandfather, who didn't really have the traditional aspect of what church was, that's all he had. Now, because my grandmother and the rest of her siblings and the rest of my family was starch Kojic, when he got saved, they tried to bring in that Kojic kind of regiment and a lot of the things we learned, but he was so dominant that he only taught that. Now he had tough love. He had, he showed extreme love. And so though I identify with where you're coming from and what you're talking through, my grandfather was a radical upheaval from what we would have typically experienced. But because of that, it was really, really, there was a sharp discord in how we actually did church. So during the time where I met you, I was probably 10 or 11 years old. And in our church, there was a lot of isms and schisms brought in. Of course, we grew up with understanding that nobody but our church was going to heaven. Nobody but anybody under Mother Bato was going to heaven, because we knew everything and we knew it all. And only, we were the only people.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a very strong relationship with my grandfather. He had a strong relationship with his grandchildren. I went into the Soul Children of Chicago, and I met all of these kids: Apostolic, Church of God in Christ, AME, Seventh Day Adventist, um, um, Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
and they all loved God. They all had an honor and a reverence, and for the most part, we all spoke in tongues, or were looking, seeking
Mm-hmm.
to speak, right? Which was maybe totally opposite of where our upbringings were coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I went back to my church because I started playing for my church at 9 years old, the organ. And so I had a lot of conversations with my grandfather. And before he would listen to a lot of the old rhetoric that had been going on,
Mm-hmm.
he understood it from me better.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was only able to give him my experience of what I was learning. And so our church was a very oddball church. Now, because my grandfather had a huge life in drugs and alcohol, womanizing, and things of that nature, he had a very strong um, deliverance ministry, if you will, for men, fathers. So our church was full of families and full of fathers that had come out of the lifestyle that he had come out of.
Mm-hmm.
And he taught love from a different perspective. Here was the problem. When we would go and visit the other God's house of, right? Because there's a God's house of all nations. There was a God's house of prayer, hope, and deliverance. There was a God's house, God's harbor for all souls. God's, there was about 9 God's houses that Mother Bato had commissioned out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we were probably the ragamuffin stepchild, because our ministry was the only ministry that was run by someone who had newly gotten saved and wasn't really following alongside the rhetoric of it. So though our intimate setting, my intimate church, did not have that regalia, or that kind of spin, if you will, because my grandfather was so new to this. The other churches that we were only allowed to partner with did.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like our big sister church, big brother churches, and we were supposed to kind of get underneath that. So Mother James out there in Robbins, where I met Mike Manson and all of them,
Mm-hmm.
that church taught us the iron fist, no slight to them, because she taught me how to play the organ.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did learn it from our brother and sister churches. It was very interesting. But because my grandfather was so new to church,
Mm-hmm.
his biggest message from the pulpit was about loving your family and second chances. So maybe fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of marriages stay together that probably didn't need to, because there was an abusive husband that did not get the same deliverance that my grandfather got. There was a woman that was on drugs that did not get the same deliverance that my grandfather got, that stayed with those families. And because in the realm of the spirit and prayer, we did all of that, but they didn't get the mental help that they needed.
Mm-hmm.
Those families struggled. And I can say today that the group of kids that grew up with me, I could maybe 10% of those still have somewhat of a relationship with God, and maybe 5% are still in the church.
Okay. Well, first of all, it sounds like your grandfather knew how to have a good time. So God bless him.
Rest his soul.
You only live once. You know what I'm saying? So grandfather,
he lived.
hey, life is to be lived. So there's that. So what coming into our formation as teenagers, and then we start getting in relationships, and for me, a lot of my definition of love came from like Disney movies.
Yeah.
Right. This fairy tale idea of what love is. And then it came from like a lot of R&B music, like Luther
Oh,
or whatever, singing about love, and Anita Baker, and Janet. To which we need to pause and say that this is Janet's weekend, and we bless Janet right now.
I
But
was trying to figure out how I was going to be on it. I'm like, how am I outdo Janet?
well, we're doing this early, so I can
Right, exactly. Oh, when I got the time, I said, oh, okay, you got
concentrate
it.
myself before tonight. But so a lot of my ideas about love came from, it didn't really come from the church per se. Um, so where did you get your ideas? We're hearing all of the things that you were taught. Did
Right.
it help you form a healthy idea about love as a teenager, or did it complicate it for you? Like, where did you get that formation, that kind of formation from?
Well, I tell you that I did get a lot of the love message from my church because that's all he preached for a large portion of my life. Um, but the type of love that my grandfather preached was kind of like, just love people through it, love them anyway. And there were no borders and boundaries, there were no guards. And so you just accepted anything at all times,
Mhm.
and you were never able to say no to
Mhm.
what people gave you, and just hashtag call it love, right? So for me, I think the depravity of that was, I did not, especially as a Christian, because it happened for me growing up as a being a Christian first, then going into relationships, right? Giving everybody a second chance. I will also tell you that our churches they were big on getting married. Everybody in our church got married
Right.
around 16, 17. My mom and dad got married at 17. My
Mhm.
mom was a senior in high school. She got married in March. She graduated in June,
Mhm.
right? So she literally ended her last bit of her senior year as a married woman. Today I would never expect that for my child, but um, Mother Bato, who was still had a very strong arm in the church that we had in on the west side,
Mhm.
um, she was adamant about getting us married young. So that was our culture. So then that was my mom's generation, the next generation, my generation. Um, if someone got pregnant out of wedlock, the next Sunday you came to the pulpit, you repented. The following Sunday you got married. If it wasn't that same Sunday in the office,
Mhm.
right? And so it wasn't love. Or I would say we equated love to acceptance of all things and anything. There was
Mhm.
no borders and boundaries. And so if you did anything outside of the standard of living, then you would have to, you'd have to get married, or you'd have to love people right there, and that's it. And so I think for me, that stuck. That stuck. And it has actually been the best side of my ministry and the worst side.
Mhm.
And until I learned how to develop healthy borders, and I'm still working through it, right? With
Mhm.
people and with my time and energy and whatnot. Um, that was kind of where that came from for me. Now, of course, I listened to music and I saw the movies as well. I saw the romantic stuff. That wasn't reality for me.
Mhm.
Because even in the young marriages that I saw growing up, and they were 16, 17. What we used to do at our churches, and I'm talking about all of the God's houses churches, probably all the way up until like the early 2000s, is when you got married, you were told to live with a husband and wife, as a newlywed couple, at least the first 5 years of your marriage.
Really?
Oh, oh,
Wow. That is,
because
I don't
you
know if I've heard that one before.
and I'm not going to say any names because my brothers and sisters are on here, but if you were a part of one of our churches, typically you moved in with either his parents or the female's parents, and y'all stayed there, and you mirrored the marriage that you saw. And that was normal for us. And I remember saying, oh, I will never live with and so I was probably one of the very, very few out of my church that did not get married when I was 17, 18, or 19 years old. We also, as young girls in our church, the girls didn't go away to college. And if you did go to college, you could only go to be a teacher, right? That was like the accepted. You could do teacher, you could do education. And so that's how I got away. And or if you were a man, you went to trade school. And so that's what my mom went to school for education, and my dad went to trade school for construction. And we were literally the pattern. We were one of many families that did that and had that mindset. My parents stayed with my mom's mom and dad for about the first 5 years in the two flat until they grew up in the eyesight of the church. And so there was a lot of strict cultic practices that really encased our ideas of not just love, but how you act on love.
And it seems like a lot of it is rooted in control.
Oh, yes.
Right? The idea that when we're kids, they're telling us what to do or not to do with our bodies, where we could go to school or what we could study when we get married, where we can live and what we can do. And I'm interested in how did that shape your identity? Because it seemed like for us with Soul Children, we got exposed to some different things, right? Like oh, there's a whole nother way of doing and being and living and existing in the world. And that broke us out. Like that was an outlet for us, but we also lived in what we lived in, and there could be some tension there between, what we're seeing and then where other people are. And I'm interested in how, as a woman or as a young woman, you started developing your own identity to say, well, this works for me, but this does not work for me, or I'm gonna go to school and I ain't never gonna not come out. This is my out.
Right. I was scared.
So
I was deeply scarred.
Yeah,
because so I was deeply scarred because so I did wait to get married to do that, but I did have a son out of wedlock at 26 years old. And so by the standard of my church, I was an old maid, but also I had a baby out of wedlock, and I refused to marry that young man. And so I was definitely like not it. Well, what happened was the control that you talk about, and I don't think it was overt. It was kind of like, well, I failed me. I thought I was going to be able to go against y'all, and it didn't work. And so now I'm pregnant and I don't know what to do, and I'm lost in life. And so I immediately just said, well, forget it. The next Joe that comes and wants to get married, I'm just going to do that. I'm going to fall within and try it y'all's way, because initially I think my mind was set to just do totally opposite of what they were saying. I was rebellious in that regard. But then when I had my come to Jesus moment, or they had the opportunity to say, see, I told you so. You should have married though, at 18 years old, you should have, and so I got into a relationship, to a marriage that had nothing to do with him. To be quite honest, he fit the mold and the bill, and without getting to truly know him and what he wanted, or he the same way, vice versa, because it fell more in alignment with what was accepted or what was normal for us. I got married.
So I'm always interested in how we fall in love and our decisions for that. So were you in love, or was this just the next step? I'm here, let me do this, kind of put the pieces of my life together and get this in order. So okay, I got the kid, well let me find a husband and
Yeah.
start rearranging the furniture in your life per se. So was it that, or were you in love?
No,
And
I definitely was not in love. So, and I'll take you even before a relationship before my husband. There was a relationship that I remember being more. I got heartbroken probably around 22. I thought I was in love with somebody. 22, 23. I was around, yeah, around that age. And I had ended a relationship after, oh my gosh, maybe 8 years. Right. And so I got my heart broken. As I said, I don't want to go with you no more. One too many times. And when I turned around, this joker went and got married to somebody else. And so, um, after that, I went through a spell of really trying to figure it out because I had not really dated anybody but him for a long time. And so then I went to my father, and my dad was different though. My dad was really, really different. My mom, not so much. But there were guys that were interested in me that would come by the church. They were, either young ministers, young deacons in other churches that were affiliated with us. And so I remember coming to my dad one day saying, "Okay, I'm gonna date this person." And my dad said, "Do you love him? No, do you like him?"
Mhm,
And I was shocked because I thought that's what he expected. I
mhm,
went to my mother and it was different. My mother said, "That's a good choice. You need to learn how to do that."
mhm,
And I tried it maybe 6 months, but I mean, I literally would get in a car with him sometimes and my skin would crawl. And I knew I just could not do, I just couldn't. He was a good guy, good, straight, solid guy. I just couldn't do it. And so I went back and I told my daddy, I said, "Daddy, could you please tell mama I don't want to do this relationship?" And he said, "You don't have to." So he was different. My mother was not. And she's, a widow of 8 years now, and she sings a whole different tune now.
mhm,
But back in the day, she was
mhm,
like, yeah. And I found out later that her mindset was you just, as her mother did, you grow to love these people, right?
mhm,
You just mature. And so it was honestly, it was the woman's job in our upbringing to make the marriage work. As a matter of fact, I remember my grandmother saying that women were a dirty dish towel in the marriage. I remember, and a lot of women in our church remember that. We were the ones that were sent, anointed even, to clean up the marriage. How did we clean them up? Through our prayer life. My grandmother fasted for 21 days for my grandfather to get saved. And at the end of a 21-day fast, he did get saved. And from that, she conceptualized and talked to hundreds of women that we were the ones that were to just take them as they are and clean them up.
mhm.
And that was the message, and you'll fall in love with basically, here's what I understand it today as, you'll fall in love with the progress that you made in somebody's life.
Mhm.
That's how I look at it today.
Sure.
That's not how I was instructed, but and so that's where you'll get your satisfaction and your reward because you made him a better person for you. And yeah, that is so unhealthy today.
Yeah, cause so here's the thing: men don't marry projects.
No,
Yeah, no, no, no. We
but
don't.
we're supposed to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, or perhaps by default, by culture, you are made to see, well, he's not everything that I want him to be, but I'll marry him and I'll fix what's wrong with him, and then he'll become whatever that is. Um, I'm interested in then what did you at that stage, let's say 22 to 25 or
Mhm.
20 to
Yeah,
25,
yeah.
what was your idea of what a man was? Uh, your idea of what a good man was, and how did you experience or not experience that?
So there were parts of my dad who loved me with everything he was and had.
Mhm.
That and he was a protector and a provider, right? And so I fell in love with. I thought that that's what love was, um, to be a protector and a provider. Um, of course, I saw. I didn't see a lot of my mom and dad hugging and kissing around the house. There was a very brief period of that. I do remember when I was extremely young, about 8 or so, right? My dad and my mom, very young in their marriage, very young in church, real supple at that time. They were always hugging and kissing around the stove. But when I got about 13 and 14, that kind of just shut down somehow. And as a matter of fact, I'll tell you that when my dad became a deacon, um, I didn't see it anymore. I didn't see that love that he had. I didn't see my mom. They weren't like that anymore. So it's something shut off. But he did put it a lot in his kids. So my sister, myself, and my little brother.
Mhm.
That's where it was. Now
Mhm.
my picture of love from a man, from that regard, that was all I expected. And
Mhm.
so when I did meet my husband, he seemed to be a protector and a provider.
Mhm.
Um,
Was
but
that enough for you?
as far
Was
as any
was
chemistry or
that enough
me,
for you?
say it again.
Was that enough for you?
I thought it was supposed to be, but it wasn't. We didn't know each other. We really
Mhm.
did not know each other. We had
Mhm.
a lot of similarities. I played for my church, he played for his church. My parents were pastors, his parents were pastors. My parents had a school, his parents had a school. And as a matter of fact, all of our similarities were within our parents and what we did for our parents, but it
Mhm.
had nothing to do with who we were as people.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
So, had you been in love before you got married?
I think I was. And the reason I say that is because the guy that I dated for a bit, from probably 16 to 20 esque, right?
Mhm.
I got to get to know him.
Mhm.
I got to get to know him, and I
Mhm.
got to choose certain things about him.
Mhm.
And when I say choose certain things about him, I got to choose on whether or not that was, something I wanted to involve myself with.
Mhm.
And we grew together, right? We talked about our interest outside of the realm of where he came from, where I came from. Um, but we were not. Uh, at that time, my mind was set. I was not going to get married to after college. Same thing with him. He was like, "No, we're definitely not going to get married until after you graduate." And he was pursuing, his degrees in management. And so we had a lot of, goals that we had kind of set,
Mhm.
and we respected from each other.
Mhm.
Um, but because there were things that the elder women of my church said that he should be doing at this time for you that he was not doing.
Mhm.
Those became the things that I would look at and be like, well, maybe he doesn't love me,
Mhm.
or maybe he's not, maybe this is not it.
Mhm.
They wanted him, because we dated probably 8 years. Like I said, after year 3, he should have been putting a ring on it.
Mhm.
And I was literally told, he's stringing you along. That is not what you wanted. He should have been made a
Would you
commitment.
have married him at that time if he
I
did
was
put a ring on it?
So he tried to put a ring on it, but I knew him, and I knew that he did not want to put a ring on it until after he finished school, and
Mhm.
until after certain things were done, until and were set financial things, and because we had talked about that, and that was our love language for each other. Being responsible was part of that.
Mhm.
But I was forced, and I have to say this honestly. I think that there were a lot of parts of the relationship then where I tried to then turn it and manipulate it into giving me what I thought they wanted me to have, when he knew that's not what you want. So
Right.
why are you listening to them? And I think that irritated him more than anything. Why are you listening to other people when this is supposed to be about us?
Right.
And that was something that he definitely did not want inside of our relationship. And mentally, if you're not able to handle that, then this is definitely not going to work out. So the last time was definitely the last time. And he walked away, and maybe a few months later or whatever, timetables don't really matter at this point, he got married
Mhm.
to someone else.
Mhm.
So yeah.
And how did you feel? How did you process that?
Oh my God. Really? I died 1,000 deaths.
Mhm.
Oh my God. I don't think I have, to this day, I don't think I have ever been
Mhm.
as destroyed
Mhm.
um, as I was in that moment when I found out that he had gotten married. I, to this day, I don't think I've ever felt a gut punch that deep,
Mhm.
right? Because we were best friends. And the last conversation we had was, I told him I found out, and I said, it's not that you're not happy, or that you're not, that you're getting married. It's that I know I'm losing not just a potential husband, but I'm losing my best.
Friend. Right.
I
Yeah.
lost I mean, he knew everything, and not just about me, but he went through 8 Christmases, barbecues, and birthdays, and stuff with my family. And he saw people get born and die, and so there was a large part of who I was that he contributed to, or was essentially, he was there in the midst,
Mhm.
and we were able to process a lot of things together. And so honestly, from that point on, I was very guarded in my relationships and very guarded in my experiences.
Yeah, one of the things they don't teach us how to do is to how to deal with a broken heart, and they don't teach us how to break up, right?
Right.
So I think the major heartbreak of my teen years came where there was this beautiful girl, and we have known each other since we were 5 and 6 years old.
Mhm.
Most beautiful girl I ever seen before in my life. Light skin, hazel eyes, just beautiful. And of course, she lived in Maywood, Bellwood. We were in the city, right?
That's
So,
where the girls come from. Pretty
okay,
girls.
you know, oof, I got some horror stories about chicks from Bellwood. So let's
Rock Maywood.
not.
West Side.
Oof. I married a chick from Bellwood, so I don't.
Oh, I know. I went to
Try
school
not
with
to frequent those parts anymore. Um,
her.
uh,
Anyway.
and so we made a choice, like when we were 12, 13 years old, we were going to go on each other's proms, right? Like no matter where we are, we're going on each other's proms.
Yeah.
I'm a year older than her. So my senior prom comes up, right? And I had a girlfriend at the time, but I was like, nah, I'm going, I promise I'm going with her or whatever. It was a very complicated situation. So
Oh
yeah,
my.
yeah, no, it was like I'm going with her. She's going to my senior prom. I'll go to your prom, but she's coming to my prom. And so she went to my senior prom, and we had a great time. So the plan was I'm gonna get started in school. You're gonna finish your senior year. I'll be 2 years in. You come to school, and we'll get married. Like that was the plan, right? And
Mhm.
so I get in school, graduate, get in school. Now it's her senior prom, so I'm going to her senior prom. And that night was just, I remember that night being just a little off. Something was a little off. Her energy was different. We danced and ate and da 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 da, but it was just off. And I remember driving home. It must have been past midnight. I think we went to the Paragon or something. When we were, that's what we did. And so we went to the Paragon to eat, and then after that, we're driving home, and she slept in the car on the way back. And I was like, we usually talked and blah blah blah, but it just that wasn't it. So about a week later or so, I'm out at the house or whatever, and she wasn't there, but her mom was there. So of course, we're just sitting around talking, and out of nowhere, I don't know what made me ask. I don't know why I said this, but I was like, "Is she pregnant?"
Wow.
She looked at me like,
The mom.
"Yeah, yeah, yeah." And I don't even know if she said yes or no or not. I think she was so stunned that I asked or I said it. I don't remember what she said, but she was pregnant. And so I get in my car to drive home. This is a true story. I get in my car to drive home back to Chicago. It's about a 20-minute drive. And so it was late at night. I don't think I even stayed. She was like on her way back, but I was like, I don't even want to see her. Like I just left. I'm driving and I'm listening to radio Night Moves with Mel Devon.
Oh yeah.
And God bless him. And he plays that Shirley Murdoch song. You left my world
Yeah.
to an end. Da, da, da. Galena, I don't know how I made it home. It had to be the Holy Ghost driving that car that night.
Minister
I
to
tell
me.
you, I burst out into tears. Like I could not see the road. Like you talking about devastated. You talking about shattered into a million different little pieces. Like, and while I'm fine now.
You okay? You okay?
Yeah, we're
Woo.
good. No. We're fine now. I'm good.
Right,
And
right.
at that moment, though,
Sure.
I did not know how to deal with my own broken heart, because you feel betrayed, then you get angry, and then at that time, well, forget it. I'll just, let me, I'll find somebody else. Da, 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 da. And you're kind of in a wilderness and you don't know how to get yourself out of. And
Yeah.
so I'm really interested in, even before marriage, because this happened before I got married, and your
Yeah.
broken heart happened before you got married.
Yeah.
How did you find your equilibrium to kind of even want to be connected with somebody again after, that kind of devastating disappointment? Like I don't know which is, I don't know. Maybe I could have took it if she would have got married on me, but she got pregnant on me, to which there was no possibility it was mine, because
Right.
so I'm not, you wait, hold on. You you out there, and it wasn't with me. Like I'm like, wait, hold on, wait. Wait, time out. Like I'm being saved, right? I'm doing everything,
Right.
do everything right,
You had to.
and you out here just, having hot girl summers way before it was.
Ever before.
You doing your thing, and I'm like, well, this is, I don't know, this is hurts my pride. It's
Yeah.
like, if you cared about me, how could you do this? Or if I
Yeah.
was as man as I thought I was, how come that didn't keep you?
Right. Yeah.
So you have all of these questions, and I have those questions. Did you question yourself, and then how did you get yourself out of all of that?
Why did I?
Yeah, Hey, you the one
I'm
signed
gonna
up to
sign
come
up
talk.
for
So you know, we
this.
we here
I
now.
am going to fly out or whatever and find you and strangle you
We here now.
after this.
Yeah, you know.
Oh, wait, is this going live? No.
It's live now. So you came back out of it. We here now. The peoples want to know.
So, um, nah. So I do understand that. I understand that testimony. Had a very similar, had a similar situation, and someone who very much like you. Gosh, this is. Sometimes there's a connection with people that you cannot explain. It doesn't come from prompts. It doesn't come from. Um, it doesn't come from a whole lot of building or conversation. Sometimes it's just there, and it has. I just got to be honest, right? So I had that with somebody. I had where it was just there. We didn't date, and it was odd. And oh, I'm gonna kill you. And yes, he did get somebody pregnant. And I knew it, but I didn't know it because we hadn't really, again, set boundaries or defined, right? We hadn't really defined what we were to each other because we were everything. We were also extremely close. Had a lot of the same types of experiences, knew a lot of the same type of people, and really loved a lot of the same things. And so, but we were we were worlds apart in some other areas, and I knew I needed to mature. I knew he needed to mature, and there was a space for me where I didn't want to mess this up. If this was ever going to be something between us and we were going to have a definition to it, he's something like, I don't want to mess this up. And I don't think he did either. However, he did get a girl pregnant, and my heart was shattered into 1,000 pieces. And so what I equated it to was the fact that, you know what, I'm young, he's young, and those are mistakes, right? We make. And I was honestly willing to forget, move forward. But I had this one thing that in my heart he had to do. And if he didn't do it, it just we weren't ever going to be together. I needed him to come for me, and he didn't. He didn't come for me. So
come get you.
He didn't come get me. And I needed him in my head then. I needed him to choose me. And he didn't choose me. And so, yes, he had a baby. He went in another direction in life. And I don't think he didn't marry right away, but then he did get married. And it wasn't until he got married that I said, oh, this will never happen. And I had to compartmentalize that. And then I did in the next relationship, I did everything that I thought was a remedy to what I had not experienced in the past relationship. And so then that relationship formed my new patterns for this next relationship. Instead of me healthily getting over the broken heart, understanding it for what it was, in order to involved in this new relationship, I just did everything that I didn't get to do in that past relationship, which is why I believe that this second relationship, we were extremely close and best friends. And to be very honest with you now, if I had it, to marry him today, I wouldn't, because he and I, in that second relationship, we became brothers and sisters, you know. And that's honestly what I built in that next relationship. But yeah, I did not know how to get over a broken heart. I knew how to move on. Life just kind of does that for you. And I moved on, and then I moved on again, and then I moved on to another relationship, then I moved on to another relationship, and spiraled. Um, and I guess I kept, for a little while, I was just going after a relationship that was better than the last one, instead of going after the relationship that was for me.
Yeah.
Right? I was righting the wrongs of the last relationship.
Trying to fix and correct what happened in the past.
Yeah.
Totally get that. One of the things that I have struggled with all my life is letting go. And early in my life, it wasn't in a relationship. It was over, like, somebody died on me, and I didn't want them to. And I was mourning and couldn't get myself out of it. And we experience the same way. Our grief is the same way with a divorce. There are, when you divorce, there's grief that comes with it. And perhaps in our life, we've experienced loss where we grieved. And I'm always interested in how we grieve. When it came to love for me, when it came to love, and I was in love with somebody and it didn't work out and I had to let them go, I asked myself, I asked a lot of people, can you unlove somebody? Like, is it possible to not love them anymore? Right. And when I came to the conclusion, okay, well, I cannot unlove this person. I have to reframe our relationship, right? Because when we love by default wants nearness. I want whoever I love, I want you near me. I want you here with me. I want to be able to lay eyes on you. I want to be able to hug you. I want to be able to talk to you. And when those things are not there anymore, whether it's somebody died on you, or whether it's breaking up with someone, or maybe it's even losing a job, right? Or moving from church to church, or the ways in which we
Transition.
start over again, and we're trying to get all of ourselves in one place. I'm interested in, has that been something that you have developed a better habit at? Both of us have lost our fathers.
Yeah.
And that's a very specific type of grief that you never get over it. You do learn how to live with it better, right? You learn how to handle it, to manage. You carry it with you, but it's not like crippling. At first, it was devastating. Like, I can't.
Oh, that's me.
Horrible. And then over time, you get stronger, and so you're able to carry it differently. How have you learned how to grieve losses through your life?
That's a good question. I'm learning how to grieve losses in my life. Well, I'll start here. I asked the Lord years ago what my ministry was, right? I asked him what was I sent on earth to do? And he didn't tell me fivefold, right? He told me, your ministry is to transitioning adults, young adults.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't understand that for a very long time. What does that really mean to transition? Like,
Mhm.
why is that important and necessary?
Mhm.
I remember there was something that I just meditated on. When my sister was born, she was born and both of her feet were turned inward. And
Mhm.
so they had to break her legs and reset them.
Mhm.
And so for the first 3 years of her life, she was in cast. She had to walk in cast. And then after
Like
they
Forrest,
took the cast, say it again?
like Forrest Gump.
Like Forrest Gump. Like she literally had those on.
That's not funny. You should not be laughing. Go.
She did. She is going to kill you. But she did. But even even after her legs were broken and they set them in cast, then they set them in braces. And after
Mhm.
she had braces for about a year or a year and a half, then she had to wear what we call Buster Browns, right?
Mhm.
So she had to
Mhm.
wear those for about another 2 years. So she had she was wearing corrective shoes until she was about 9 or 10 years old.
Mhm.
And so I got to see for the first 9 or 10 years of her life, her transition. And it was painful. It was painful to watch. And I know it was painful for her. I
Mhm.
remember when she had to get the shots. I remember when she had to go and have multiple surgeries. I remember my mother and father's face when it happened. I remember the all night prayer services that we had concerning it. I remember all of that. I remember her having a lot of attention. Like my parents had to give her a lot of attention. And I just watched that. I watched her, and the Lord reminded me of that process. That the transition wasn't the next step; it was the next couple of steps, right? And so I said that to say that I'm learning that getting over or transitioning through life, it's in stages.
Mhm.
Levels of hurt, levels of correction, levels of there's levels of protection. And I'm gonna tell you that my sister would tell you that she preferred wearing the cast over wearing the Buster Browns when she was 8 and 9 years old.
Mhm.
Because at 3, when she was wearing the cast, or yeah, 2 and 3 when she was wearing the cast, people could understand and could relate to what was going on. But at 9, the 9-year-old little kids in the neighborhood are looking at her like, why are you wearing them Buster Brown shoes? They look ugly, right? And so it looks like something that you should be able to control yourself,
Mhm. Mhm.
but you can't.
Right.
And so I found that even at the latter end of the transition, it's the spaces where now I'm supposed to look like I'm totally healthy because I'm a pastor now. I'm supposed to look like I totally got it together because I'm an entrepreneur or I'm an educator or I've graduated or I've got some kind of degree. At this point, I'm supposed to look like I got it all together, but I'm actually still wearing and choosing to wear because I still need to support Buster Brown shoes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but the world is going to look at you like, you know, you should choose something different, you know. And I found, and I'm sure you have, that nobody can put the time limit on your grief like they can't put the time limit on your transition and how long it takes you to transition.
Mhm.
It's another step. And so, of course, when she was about 10 and going in 12 years old, she was able then to start wearing cute shoes, the patent leather Easter shoes instead of the Buster
Mhm.
Brown shoes.
Mhm.
And years later people forgot, oh yeah, I forgot you had broken legs. And they never remember your
Yeah.
process, but you do. You
Right.
struggle through it, right? You process through it. And what I found out through her testimony was it was that last part
Mhm.
that was the toughest, because she had to stand on it alone without having any um there was nothing for other people to measure where she was.
Mhm.
And so there is a point that even faith is active, should be active in your grief process, and not just faith to get through it and continue, but faith to be able to now vocalize what you're doing now, to vocalize, hey, it may look like I got it all together, but I still got some questions. And
Mhm.
I'm still in my corrective state. I'm not lame. I'm not broken. I've gone through the surgeries. I've gone through the healing, but I'm still being molded in this moment. I'm still being corrected in this moment. And I think for me, even now, I'm not brokenhearted over my divorce. I'm not lame anymore. I'm not sick to my stomach, and I've gone through all of those stages. But there are certain things and limits, I guess, that I have set up, that only signify to me now that I'm at the end of this.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
So the difference between you and I was, by the time we married, we were in two different places. I was not doing ministry. I was not in full-time ministry.
Okay.
Um, I was looking towards that, right? And so I need to get all my ducks in a row. I need to find a wife to kind of live out, projection or whatever our ideas of what a
Yeah.
healthy ministry was. It was with a companion, with a spouse. You were doing ministry, right, with your ex-husband, and then you got a divorce. Um, there are stereotypes for single people in ministry,
Yeah.
right? Um,
I hate them.
that you have to be able to govern yourself with a heightened sense of awareness, um, because as a man, people come into ministry, and because you're single, they by default think you're available, right?
Absolutely.
And so I came into being very guarded. You talked about boundaries. um, I came into ministry at a heightened awareness that I have to have boundaries, because, and I've had this conversation publicly with some people. I said that if I am not hyper vigilant about that, if something happened at the church between me and some woman or me and some man, whoever it was, and it gets out, by default, you're going to believe it because you're going to be like, he's single. Of course well, I knew he was doing something, right? I
Absolutely.
knew he was doing something, had to be something, right? And even if it's not true, the perception is because I am a single man, I want every woman, right? And it
Yeah.
could be, further
Ah,
from the truth. But now what I have imagined, though, being in ministry together, there's a certain protection, like you all cover each other's blind sides and backs, and go into environments where you're not alone, right? And now you don't have that anymore, and I'm wondering how vulnerable, or if is there ever is there vulnerability in that for you, something that I am used to feeling that way. I
yeah.
suspect this may be a new a new sensation, a new way of being for you.
Absolutely.
And how are you feeling, and how are you managing that for yourself?
Oh, wow. So, yeah, all of that. I was under the understanding, um, well, let me just jump and say this, that when my ex-husband and I were dating, he was interested in this one job, ministry job in another state. And so when he filled out the application, and he had a lot of, you know, recommendations and references from awesome ministries, and they rejected his application. And so of course he asked, why did they reject his application? And they said to him, because he was not married. And so then he and our conversation shifted, because he was like, well, I want to do ministry, and I know it's in you. So we need to go ahead and get married, and then I'll resubmit for this position at this organization. It wasn't a church, but it was, of course, church related ministry. And so that's not the sexiest way to tell somebody that we should probably get married, take this relationship to the next level. But it was my story. And I think for me, I decided that I tried everything else. And so now I needed to go ahead and just fully submit to just ministry. So any other interest that I had outside of ministry needed to just die. I needed to just do ministry, even though I had other aspirations. And I had never seen a person successfully do ministry and anything else in marketplace, except for my grandmother and my mother who had a school, but that didn't really equate in my head as outside ministry, right? That just seemed like the Sunday school department extended Monday through Friday.
Right.
So it didn't really look like ministry and marketplace to me. With that being said, I went on and got into ministry. When I was in ministry with my ex-husband, seemingly his ministry started to diminish. And I was just a Bible study teacher. I was also an MD at another church, but my ministry started to rise and his impact and influence, whatever, started to fall. And so actually we had a lot of issues within our marriage because of it. Because and so actually I felt more uncovered and not protected, but I was under the same impression and thought that in order to do ministry you had to be married. And so I endured a lot in my marriage because I thought that I needed him to at least be a body and stand there. And even though, through his just personhood, his actions or whatever, he had already basically was done. He was over it. He was over the marriage part and over protecting me. And actually a lot of the people in the ministry felt it. They saw it, they felt it. But again, I think that because I didn't speak up about it then, it was, hey, this is what women are supposed to take in ministry. And so coming back into ministry post my marriage, I had to fight a lot of that. I had to fight a lot of the ideology that you can't do ministry, you're not married. You need to be married first before you go at it again. And I had to honestly stop myself and say, what in the, why are you still believing that? Like, who is making you? And I had to do therapy. I actually went to a therapist and had to honestly get into that. Why did I think? Because we were taught Priscilla and Aquila ministry. We, in my church experience, we were never really taught women doing ministry alone. We saw them minister too, but it was never equated that this was their ministry, right? It was never a valid, this is their ministry. And so I had to do research on my own, find the women apostles in scripture, find those that serviced Jesus and financially supported his ministry, as well as stood in the gap and preached the same word that he preached. Like, I had to do those. I went to Israel. I went and stepped foot in the tabernacles and churches that women built and pastored, during the times of Jesus and after the times of Jesus in Macedonia. And anyway, to really encourage my heart and establish that, this is something that, you can do, it's valid. Because I thought I needed a covering, if you will. And so I struggled at the beginning. For a while, I thought that then what I would do was, oh, I feel like dying right now. I thought that what I would do is and I did it. I would just do I told God, I was like, okay, I'm going to do ministry, but I'm going to just do it, real low key, and then when I get married, then I'm going to come out. And by that time I'll bring, quote unquote, bring the church with me. It'll already be built. And then me and my husband, we can step out like, bam, here go Mr. and Mrs. such and such. and now they're doing ministry. And I was just going to build it under, under wraps. And the
Mhm.
Lord was like, no more building ministry under wraps. And I did that probably the last 8 years. I built ministry under wraps, did things under wraps. And so this is the first year that the Lord is like, no, I'm going to expose you as a single woman
Mhm.
in ministry. And it fights every ideal that I had as a child doing ministry. It fights, to my core. I told one of my aunts, I said, I would never belong to a church where a female was the pastor.
Mhm.
I've I've had that conversation with her,
Mhm.
and oh, I've had that conversation, and I've used all kinds of excuses. They're over,
Mhm.
they're emotional, and I didn't realize I was such an anti-feminist. I had to deal with that, but those were things that I was taught.
I get it. No, 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 no. I totally get it. And I don't know if I realized how how a woman could be against another woman or taught to be
Yeah,
against another woman in leadership until Hillary ran for president.
trust me.
There were women who could not conceptualize a woman leader, not because she wasn't qualified, she was overqualified. Not that she wasn't prepared, she was wonderfully prepared. It was just because she was a woman, and their
Yeah,
idea of leadership was it had to be a man, even if it's a horrible man, even
yep,
if it's the worst man. Like they wouldn't vote for her. And so a lot of that is, I guess, culture and the way we grew up and the roles we play, or we
yes,
see played out, that some kind of way seep into our adult life and into our relationships and into ministry. I know that the church can be a very unkind place for women because I have seen it. I've seen it, how women are treated who are preachers
yeah,
and what they're subjected to behind closed doors. I've seen women in the pews used for all type of utilities that are horrendous, horrible, demeaning, abusive, and all the like. And so I respect a woman because if I feel vulnerable and I'm a man, right, and I
right.
live with this vulnerability, it has to be magnified on levels for you, and not just you alone, but a lot of my friends who are women
Yeah,
who are doing ministry. It has to be magnified 100 times over. And with that, it is not just that you are doing ministry, leading in ministry, but you're doing it alone. That's one thing, but you're doing it post a divorce,
that
right?
part.
It carries a whole
Oh,
other thing with it,
yes.
because you are, without people having context,
Yeah.
they assume something about your life. They assume
Failure.
that they know, and then you're struggling with what I know to be true that we can't talk about. Because
Right.
to this day, I have not said what has happened between.
And won't say.
I won't. That's none of people's
Because it's
business.
none of your business.
Y'all think whatever you all want to think, and I'll play whatever role you think I play, whatever you want to do. That's fine with me.
Right.
But I think there's a way, even when you're failing, to have integrity, right?
Yeah.
That, we're not together, but I am not. What happened between you and I happened between you and I. I'm not going to expose you, even to the extent of, if people's perception about me is one thing that's totally not the truth.
Right.
I'm going to let it be. And again, I don't think they really teach us how to break up and how to be divorced in
No.
the church.
No.
Um, and I think I've said this
Not from the
before.
pulpit.
Yeah, no, 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 no. And so That's it. Here's a question for you, and we can wrap up because I know I could. This is very
Right. This is a call we need to take after us because there's some stuff I'm gonna be
yeah,
like,
right.
really? You asked that? Okay. You know I'm gonna cuss you out real.
Hey, you agreed to come, so it's just going. You knew what the subject is, what the thing was. This is what it was. Here's a question for you. Because to hear you talk, your younger self was in love with somebody who broke your heart, and then you got married, and it wasn't about love. Do you think you have the capacity to be in love again, or maybe love for the first time, right? Like for yourself.
I I'm gonna get you.
Or do
Yes,
you
I
even
do.
want that for yourself?
Right. Of course, I have to kind of base this in the fact that I understand that there are different types of love, right? But we are talking about more specific love. This is not the agape love, right? So
That's not what this is.
it's not that's not
Don't do that.
and I love again agape. I got you. And oddly enough, I'm known as the apostle of love and glory, right? So I'm very accepting. I accept a lot of things. I love people in various, that are contrary to some of the standards that the church say. So I minister to those that are in homosexual and lesbian relationships with no holds bar, and I accept them, and I am a part of just a whole lot of vast different communities that were at one point ostracized from the church or deeply regarded as secular or worldly. And I ministered to that.
Hold on. Wait. Hold on. Because you're giving me a lot. That's wonderful. I get it. I am asking you about you for all the love that you give and accepting and embracing. First of all, can you do that for yourself? And do you have the capacity to allow somebody to do that with you?
Yeah, and that's all I was gonna say. So I feel like I mastered that other part. This part I have not mastered. And I'm okay with saying that now. I have not mastered moving in a relationship with someone that can love me again or love me the way that I deserve to be loved. So even though a lot of my ministry is built off of covenant, one of the things that I struggled with in my previous marriage is I had to, you have to find out where you failed the relationship. I realized that I was extremely dutiful in my marriage, but I did not devote any time to really knowing him, and that was a frustration that he didn't even know how to articulate. It was during my therapy that I realized, oh, so you mean cleaning the house, cooking, having certain things prepared for him. That wasn't what he was talking about. That's not what he wanted to show and prove love. Taking care of certain things so that he could be comfortable. That wasn't love. I was taught that.
Right.
So I had to go on a discovery as to what love is and what was the type of love that I wanted. Right. And I'm there. I'm learning that, and I have to be honest that the ministry me sometimes gets in the way because and that's why I'm not in a relationship right now. The ministry me can and would and will accept any and everything. And so I have to be intentional when I get ready for that. I need to be intentional in that space and say, okay, God's love for the church is not the guy's love for Gaylena. And I got to make sure that that Guy and Galena love is Guy and Galena love. That's going to be beyond the relational love. That's going to be, I can't love. I can't love, and I know this is so anti-scripture. I can't love my husband like Christ loved the church.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be able to do that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's asking a lot. That's a really big ask.
that's a really big ask.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes our capacity, that's our model, what we actually have the capacity to do sometimes falls short of that. And I think that's fair. That's fair to us, and it's fair to, that's why he's God. That's why God
by himself.
Right. And I totally understand that ministry is a great place to hide from life.
Yes, it is.
It's a wonderful excuse not to have a life. And so we can wrap up. You have to come back, and then we can.
Yeah, I'll come back. I'll be a little more. I'll have to get a little more script. But I do want to be in love, and this is not a and DM me, inbox me, dudes from everywhere. No, but I have the capacity. I've grown tremendously in understanding the difference, but I think that's where I had to start. I had to start with Galena, understand the difference between loving in the church and loving the church body and serving the church body, and then loving in your marriage and serving in your marriage and having your marriage to serve you. Because I'm such a giver, receiving had been a very hard thing for me. And that's a personal thing, which I don't think was just church issue. That was Galena issue.
Sure.
Being such a giver and not expecting certain things in return, and then internalizing that, and that becoming a inward decay, and then obviously destroying the relationships on the outside. But
we don't talk about being a giver is a shield from being vulnerable.
Yes.
Right? If I'm always giving, that means I'm controlling your emotions, behavior, what you do. So if I keep giving, then you keep responding the way I want you to respond, and that keeps us from being vulnerable to somebody not responding the way we want them to respond, or perhaps you're giving me something that makes me feel afraid or uncomfortable, and I'm uncomfortable with it. So let me keep giving because I can control the relationship if I keep giving. If you give to me, that makes me uncomfortable and vulnerable, and I don't like to feel that way. So I'm glad to hear that you want that in your life. And so I'm going to hold you accountable to that while you're conquering the world. Here's what one of the greatest lessons about love I learned. I was at a concert, Frankie Beverly and Maze. He was singing, they sang "We Are One." And I had never heard the song before, but I was like, it's beautiful. And after he sang, he was like, for all you all do, you better have some love in your life. And I was like, wow. It's like, and like in that moment, like I totally understood that for all we do, for all we give, that the fuel for that is going to ultimately be love, because we grow, we are strengthened, we are made better when we are loved correctly. Allowing somebody to do that is a thing, but theoretically, the goal is to have that. Okay, so I'm gonna let you go. I got 5 quick questions.
Okay.
This is for everybody. Okay. Do you believe in heaven?
Yes.
Okay. What do you know about love now that you didn't know then?
I know that love has as many restrictions, has more restrictions now. I know that now. Love has restrictions.
You have to unpack that. I don't know. I don't.
That's a big huge thing. Love has boundaries. I should put it like that. Love has
Okay.
boundaries.
Okay. Okay. Next question.
You don't have to love anything,
Right.
right?
Or
So,
anybody.
or anybody.
Oh, let me put a pin right here. No, I had to learn this. That just because somebody loves you doesn't mean you're obligated to love them back the same way. Right. Um,
Yeah.
and I can respect, and we should respect the way people feels, but that's the way you feel. I don't have to return that to you just because that's what you want to give to me. But that's boundaries, and that's good. You should write that.
Yeah.
What is love?
Love today for me, and it's always exploding, always expansive definition. Um, Love is understanding and accepting um, who you are and where you are
Mhm.
in and how you impact those that you love. That's where love really begins to cultivate and grow.
Mhm.
That's love.
Okay. Next question. Where do you find joy? And don't say nothing about ministry of the church.
No, no,
Yeah. Just take that off the table. Okay.
no,
So,
no. I
fine. No, I'm not
um,
saying you were going to say
no,
that. I'm
no,
just saying
I
let's just
wasn't.
take that off the table.
Right. I got you. I got you. I got you.
Okay.
Um, well, I love art. I absolutely love art, and I find joy in art galleries and just artistic expression. So any type of artistic expression. I'm probably the girl that I go to sleep to certain TikToks of expressionists and artists, and I love to see people create. Like that brings me joy. Seeing people uninhibited do what they do, like that brings me joy.
That's cool. That's great. Last question. What has changed about yourself during COVID?
Mm, a lot. Um, a lot. COVID definitely shifted me. Um, you do find what's essential. You find out what's essential. You get to really look at yourself and the things that I went into COVID with thinking that those were important are and those facades, right? Those structures um, are no longer important. I can give a rat's tail about certain things now that
Mhm.
prior to COVID,
Mhm.
I may have been intimidated by, may have been focused or driven to do or to be or to go after.
Mhm.
Um, and it was very similar to the death of my dad, to be honest with you, because it was the death of my dad that made me stop with a lot of the facades, especially about love. As I have to say this, that when my dad died and I got the word, I remember sliding down the wall saying, the only man that has ever loved me is dead. And at the time, I was only separated from my husband. I wasn't divorced yet, but I truly felt like, I
Mhm.
had not been in one single relationship where it was reciprocated, right? And that changed a lot of things in me and for me. And COVID did the same thing. Like when COVID hit, it was like some of the stuff that I thought I needed to do, needed to prove. COVID was like, I remember, I remember, and I'm done. I remember headed to this huge business deal, this meeting.
Mhm.
And I had so much pressure in this business deal. And I was trying to kind of formulate to fit the structure of what was possible. And I got an email that because it was going to be a Zoom call, but they were out of town. I got an email that the president of the company that we were meeting with died
Mhm.
of COVID. And so everything that I was building on, banking on, scrutinizing myself through, that one person died, and it shifted and changed everything that I was doing, believing in, structuring for. So that to me said, hey, you didn't believe in that in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So that wasn't important to you. So you literally put all that energy, time, emotion, other people's time, energy, and emotion. You ought to be more careful, Gaylena, about what you're truly committing to. Because if what I'm committing to doesn't go beyond death, then there is some pressure points I need to take off myself.
Yeah.
And some things I need to, reevaluate as far as the flexibility and the change of that, and making sure that per legacy, if it goes into another hands, that it's just as malleable as it needs to be. Because I almost had a heart attack, right? Because of all of the pressure that I was putting on myself. And so I guess I should have just said it this way. Everything is not that serious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Well,
so live life to the fullest.
Yeah, absolutely. Live now.
Yeah.
You might as well
Live now.
live the life. Yeah. So thank you for hanging out. This was fun.
It wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna.
What do you mean? Let's have a delightful time.
Well, see, I know you. We ain't gonna have that conversation because I know Janet finna come on. But
yeah,
I know you.
Yeah, but it's all good.
Yeah,
it's all good. Thank you for coming. Tell everybody where they can find you and reach out to you on social media, and information about the online church and all of that.
So they can go to Dr. Gaylena on Instagram, or the name of our church's YouTube and Instagram and all social media platforms is We Are Cutting Edge. So that's what it is.
Wonderful. Well, God bless you. God speak to you. Thank you for coming. You can always come back. This is great. We can do this.
We can.
Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with I know. Thank you for everybody for hanging out with us and being with us. We hope this helped. We hope that you were enlightened in some way. Thank you, Dr. Gaylena, for being with us. And I will see you all next week for another episode of the Love Again podcast. Bye-bye.